Perfect. Okay, Chaverim, it's wonderful to see everybody. Let's get the right screen up here. There we go. It's wonderful to see everybody. Last time we left off with talking about the walls around Yericho and the collapse of the walls around Yericho. We're going to do a short review of a couple of details, and then we're going to talk about walls, because walls are fascinatingly important in Yehoshua. They are fascinatingly important with regards to Hilchos Purim, walled cities versus unwalled cities. And as we are going to discuss in a bit, they are incredibly important with regards to Shemitah and Yovel, which is part of the halachas that we're talking about this year in particular. So something that we know about Yericho is incredibly closed off, very well closed off. Says the pasuk, "V'Yericho sogeres u'misugeres." It is closed and shut off. Mipnei bnei Yisrael, from before the Jewish people. Ein yotze ve'ein ba. No one goes in, no one goes out. That's a lot of closing off, right? That is sogeres, closed, u'misugeres, and extra closed. Mipnei bnei Yisrael, because of the Jewish people, or in the face of the Jewish people. Ein yotze ve'ein ba. Nobody goes in, nobody goes out. All of these statements are somewhat strange, meaning the extensiveness of the closed offness of the city. Now, of course, Yehoshua and Bnei Yisrael are going to surround the city 7 times, 7 days, 7 times, and then on the 7th day, they are going to surround the city 7 times, and then the walls are going to come down. And we learned last time that 7th day of the 7 days and 7 times was Shabbos, at least according to the majority of authorities of the Midrashim. And then they take the city. Now, what's fascinating to point out just at the end of the parakah is that taking the city almost happens by itself. Meaning the Torah doesn't describe a war. There's like no war that takes place. The Tanakh does not describe a war. The pasuk says like this: after they blew the shofar, so vatipol hachoma tachta, and the walls fell beneath it. Vayal ha'am ha'ir, and the people went up into the city. Ish negdo, each person corresponding to where they were. Vayil kedu es ha'ir, they took the city. Vayachrim es kol asher ba'ir, they destroyed everything in the city. Me'ish v'ad isha, minar v'ad zaken, man, woman, and child, old and young. Ad shar v'seh, including livestock, v'chamar, lefi charev, and donkeys, everything by the sword. There was like nobody facing off against them. There was like no battle. It doesn't sound like there was any. It's like they just walked in, and what happened? Which is strange, because in the next war that they're going to face against the city of Hai, we're going to see that there is a battle, and in fact they lose that battle. There was a battle, right? There was some kind of skirmish. Yeah, there's nothing. The city is totally sealed shut, and nobody comes in, nobody goes out. It is impenetrable, except for the fact that a miracle happens, the walls crumble down, and then they take the city. Now, in order to understand what the value of a walled city is, and what Yericho is in particular, we need to understand the halachas of walled cities. And we're going to do this within the context of Hilchos Shemitah in particular. So we'll keep that tab open here, because we're going to need it back. But let's take a look at the Rambam in Hilchos Shemitah v'Yovel. Opening up to the Rambam in the Mishnah Torah, Hilchos Shemitah v'Yovel. Here we go. There it is. Hilchos Shemitah v'Yovel in the 12th parak. The halacha is as follows. Very quick recap of Hilchos Shemitah is every 7 years there is a Shemitah year, 6 years of work in the fields, and then the 7th year is Shemitah. In the Shemitah year, nobody gets to work their fields. All of the produce of the field belongs to everybody, really belongs to Hashem, that everybody can eat from. And a farmer that has fruit trees that yield produce, or that has a field that grows grain, is not allowed to close it off for other people to not be able to benefit from. He has to leave it open so that people can come and take. Okay, That's Shemitah. After 7 Shemitahs, there is a Yovel. Now, Yovel has all of the dinim of Shemitah with regards to agriculture. You can't work the field, you have to leave the fields open, etc. But there are additional dinim with regards to Yovel as well, which is part of the land agreement and slavery agreement of buying, selling, leasing, purchasing of land and people, which is that by the Yovel year, everything goes back to its original owners. Everything goes back to its original owners. So if I own a field and for whatever reason I needed to sell that field, it's not a sale. It is a maximum of a 49-year lease. By year 50, it goes back to me. So in year 49, meaning 49 years away from the Yovel year, that land is very valuable. 1 year before the Yovel year, land is not so valuable, meaning everything is calculated, and that's a pasuk in the Torah in Parshas Bahar, that everything is calculated in accordance with how close or far we are to the Yovel year. That's the din. There is an exception to this din. There is an exception, which is Bate Are Choma, which is houses that are in a walled city. Houses that are in a walled city do not necessarily go back to their original owners. What's the din? Says the Rambam as follows. A mocher bayis besoch ir ha mokefes chayma. Person that sells a house that is within a walled city. Harei ze ga'ala kol yud beis chodesh. Miyom shemachar b'chol eish yirtzeh. They can reverse the purchase for 12 months from the day of sale, anytime they want. Meaning, I have an apartment in a walled city. I've fallen hard times. I need to sell that apartment. Sell that apartment to you. Now it's yours. But if I come back to you with that money anytime within 12 months, it belongs to me again. You don't have to give it to me. It's yours. Unless I come up with that money within 12 months. That's the din. However, says the Rambam, even on the day that you sold it, I can reverse that sale instantaneously. Right? I can control Z on that sale. That is the right of the owner of that house. And if he wants to acquire it back, nosen kol hadamim shalakach. He has to give all of the money of the purchase price. Does nothing bad to the purchase at all, meaning this is part of the deal of purchasing. What happens if he does not redeem it within 12 months? So the din is, says the Rambam in Halacha Zayin, Higia yom yud beis chodesh v'lo nimtza lokach livdos mimenu harei ze maniach ma'asav bebeis din v'shover sadel v'nichnas beisa. If 12 months you're on day you're on day 365, right? Meaning, or however many days in 354, right? In the lunar calendar, 12 months, right? From the day, he gets to the very last day that he can purchase back his home, and the purchaser is nowhere to be found. Nowhere to be found. So what does he do? Says the Rambam, the din is you take the money, you give it in escrow to the Beis Din, effectively. You break down the door, you re-enter your house. You have the right. And whenever the purchaser that purchased it from you wants to get his thing, he can go and get his money. Now, Machar Beis Ir Chayma V'Higiu Yovel B'Sayich Shnas HaMechar Ein Echaz B'Yovel. With Yovel is irrelevant. Is irrelevant to this din. Meaning, within 12 months of having sold it, if it's Yovel, doesn't change a thing. Same din applies. If he wants, he can buy it back within the year. And if he doesn't, he doesn't. Yovel is irrelevant to a home in a walled city. Doesn't make a difference. Once it is sold and the year has expired, it now belongs to the new owner, glatt, completely. That's the din of bayis in an ir chayma. Now, One would ask the question as follows. Surely, we should say the opposite. We should say the opposite. A home in a walled city has more, you should say, stolz, yeah? Home in a walled city is like, this is mine. A field, okay. A field can be taken, a field can be captured, okay. Somebody can encroach on my land, but a field, but a home in a walled city, that's gated community, right? You got a guard, you got a boom, you got some neon lights. Gives a greater sense of ownership. This is mine. If I had to sell it for a tag, okay, so it should for sure go back in the Yovel. Should for sure go back in the Yovel. That's mine. You have a city that is in the territory of Zvulun. Comes along some random guy from Vesich Shimon and says, "I want to buy this apartment in Zvulun city, old city." So this is the capital city of Zvulun's province. Shimon's going to come and claim an apartment in that city? That makes no sense. Why is it that there is such fungibility of home in an Ir Chaima? So that is question number one that we have to deal with. What's going on in this halacha? Question number two is, what is the value of this year that goes by? So 12 months. It's not 365 days, it's 12 months. Yud Beis Chodesh. You have to have 12 months. What do the months have to do with this? They're in months. And why is it that Yovel is not relevant here? Yovel is not relevant at all. Yovel is the return of ancestral homelands to their original owners. So in order to understand this, we need to understand two other halachas with regards to Shemitah and Yovel and Eretz Yisrael. The first is to understand that with regards to other nechasim, pieces of property that are, things that have value that are not tied to the ground, meaning they're not real estate, Yovel is irrelevant to. Meaning, if I sell you a computer, it doesn't become mine 49 years later, right? Those items, anything that can be picked up and moved around. So it sounds like the apartment that you have in Zvulun's capital city is less tied to the ground than the field, which also sounds somewhat strange. That's calculation number one. Calculation two, and this is important to understand, is the din of Benos Tzlavchad. So you might remember that there was a man in the Chumash by the name of Tzlavchad, did not have sons, he only had daughters. And his daughters came and they complained. They said to Rabbi Moshe, right? That was his Ashkenazi name, right? Moses Rabinowitz. They said to him, Rabbi Moses, not fair. We hear 5 daughters of Tzlavchad. What's going to happen to his portion? So the people from their tribe said, well, you can only marry within the tribe. That land needs to stay within the tribe. What's the din? They can marry whoever they want. That's the halacha. Which means that land that belongs to daughters can move around just like Bate Arei Chaima. They can move around. Meaning, you have land that belongs to somebody that only has daughters in Yissachar's portion. That land could become a sub-province, right, of Reuven's inheritance. Meaning, it's possible for the land to change ownership in that, and then it doesn't go back in Yovel. Now it becomes the homestead of this family from Reuven, because that girl that inherited from her father now passes on to her husband's family. So that land is also somewhat fungible, is movable. So let's try to understand. Let's try to understand this. The first thing to understand is with regards to Eretz Yisrael. Who does Eretz Yisrael belong to? Avram, right? Avram. Before it was divided up between the 12 tribes, Who did it belong to? We'll see it later in Sefer Yehoshua. They did a lottery where they determined who goes where. But before that, who did the land belong to? Now, after we defeated them, but before everybody got their allotted portion, belonged to everyone, all of Klal Yisrael, the whole nation. Meaning the whole nation owned Eretz Yisrael, and then to a certain extent, layered on top of that ownership of Eretz Yisrael was specific ownership. There is a general ownership of Eretz Yisrael, and then there is specific ownership. But that general does kind of show up from time to time. It shows up in Batei Arei, that this is a piece of land, a piece of property that can be owned by anybody. Doesn't have to go back to a specific tribe. And it shows up in the inheritance, in the Yerusha Sabas, in the inheritance that goes through a daughter, could technically lift the tribal ownership of the land and move it over to some other tribe. Because that general ownership of the land that belongs to all of Klal Yisrael, that still exists as like the base level of all property. Why is it in particular that Batei Arei Choma are so fungible? So, in order to understand this, we need to understand the psychology, sociology, mentality, and history of a walled city. Moshe Rabbeinu references this to the Meraglim. He says, go and check out what kind of cities they live in. Go see what kind of cities they live in. What difference does it make what kind of cities you live in? So, we'll say like this, the origin of this thinking, to a certain extent, is a Sforno in Parshas Noach. We'll see if we can find this here. The Sforno in Parshas Noach talking about Migdal Bavel. What was the purpose of Migdal Bavel? Why do they want to build the tower? Why do they want to build the city and the tower within it? Migdal Bavel is we're in Parshas Noach at almost at the end. Yeah. Sorry. That was here. Vayimru ish el re'ehu. They said one person to another. Have a banal vinim. Let's make bricks for nisrafali shirfa and bake them. Right, fire the clay. V'tihi lahem halavina la'aven. And we should make the clay into stone. V'achemar hayat lahem lachomer and use the mud as cement. Vayamru, and then they said, have a nivne lanu ir. Let's build a city. Migdal v'rosho b'shamayim, and a tower with its head in the sky. V'naseh lanu shem, and let us make for us a name. What does that mean? Pen nafutz al pnei kol haaretz, lest we be scattered around the world. So, Chazal tell us that they were plotting against Hashem, that they were trying to establish this as a place of Avodah Zarah. Doesn't say that in the pasuk. Where did Chazal get that from? Where's that coming from? The next pasuk says that Hashem disapproves. Right? Hashem comes down and he wants to see the people in the tower. They all speak similarly. This is what they decide to do. And now they will be able to do whatever they want. So let's go and mix them up, and they won't be able to communicate properly, etc. What was the sin? What did they do wrong here? What does the pasuk say? Doesn't say they did anything wrong.
It's a concern that they will be led astray by
something. Yeah, by something. So let's take a look at the Sforno here. It says the Sforno as follows. Says the Sforno, Vayimru hava nivne lanu ir. Let's make a city. Zos hayisa atzas sarei hadar. This was the idea of the ministers of that generation. Lahamlich es Nimrod, to make Nimrod their king. Right? Nimrod was the most powerful king at the time. Al kol hamina enoshi, over all of humanity. One king. We're going to, one nation under God, except not God, but Nimrod. We're going to have Nimrod as the king. And the city is what we are going to make. As Migdal v'Rosh Hashamayim v'Naseh lanu Shem. We make for ourselves a name. What does it mean to make yourself a name? It's a strange thing to say. We're gonna make a name for ourselves. We're gonna go to Hollywood, right? Make a name. I'm gonna make a name for myself. What does that mean? It says the Sefer, Nasa Shem. We will make a name. Shitiyeh kamigdal. That it would be like a tower. Vayetze bechol hamin ha'enashi, and it will be publicized to all of humanity. Shem gova mikoma v'godol ira. Ba'ofen shetechashev elokei ha'elokim etzel kol bnei ha'adam ve'el yidushu kulam. In such a way that this will be, effectively, the God of all of humanity. Meaning, says this from the Kavanaba, Melech al Osa Ha'ir Yimloch al Kol Amina Eneshi Biyos Sham Drishas Kulam. All of humanity will see that king over that city as the ruler of humanity, because that is where everybody will be heading to. Now, it's not a shame. It means that we're going to publicize the fact that whatever you need in the whole wide world, you can get in our city. Meaning, when you come to Bavel, you can find whatever you need. You need medical help, we'll give it to you. You need financial aid, we'll give it to you. You need housing, we'll give it to you. You need food, we'll give it to you. Whatever you need. Whatever you need in the whole wide world, we will be the city at which all humanity will be able to fulfill their needs. What does that mean? You don't need a God anymore. You don't need God. Whatever you need in the whole wide world is taken care of by your city. Means human collaboration, technological prowess, shared resources. You don't need God anymore. Who needs God? What? Somebody's sick, you have to go pray? No. You have all the best doctors in the world. Somebody needs a parnasa, you have to pray? No, you don't. You can go. You can get welfare. City's going to Migdal Bavel. One king, he'll be able to coordinate all of the resources of humanity. And that way, Pena Futsal Pnei Kalaretz, lest we be scattered. Well, if we're scattered, then we won't be collaborating, we won't be communicating. We will be fighting over resources. Instead of fighting, let's pull everything together. We can do this. It's a beautiful dream, which has a devastatingly dark side to it, which is the replacement of God. Now, ultimately, this is the dream of Yerushalayim. That Yerushalayim will be a place to which all of humanity will coalesce with all of the sharing of resources and the best ideas of collaboration, where people won't feel that a need to compete in order to be able to get ahead. Everything that you need will be there. We'll be able to channel our energy as a species into developing the world the way that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants, but there's HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The vision of Migdal Bavel was to do all of that, but you don't need Hashem then. So the Rebbe Shalom comes down and says, well, if they do this, then they will actually succeed. They will be able to create a world where there is no God, but that is operating with a replacement of God, which means that humanity will never, ever, ever achieve its aim of bringing HaKadosh Baruch Hu into the world, of rectifying human negativity. And what you end up with here is the possibility of a totalitarian state that everybody believes is wonderful. Now, it's interesting to point out, especially in the context of the war that's going on in the world at the moment between Russia and Ukraine, that Rabbi Yosef Yehuda Bloch in Shuri Das, we're talking about the second Rosh Yeshiva of Tel, so it was the son-in-law of Rabbi Lezer Gordon. In Shuri Das, he discusses Migdal Bavel, and he talks about it explicitly within the context of communism, of this idea of everybody being able to be in service of one kingdom, and the depravity that resulted as a result of it is the total exploitation of people, which is why Chazal describe that in service of building the tower, that if somebody would drop a brick, they would throw the person off the tower. Meaning, how could it be that you drop the brick? This is all about building our world together. If you made such a egregious mistake as to drop a brick from the tower, we'd chuck you off with it, because how could it be? So, along without a moral code, the idea of human unity and collaboration becomes terribly depraved. But it's possible. It is possible to build a society without Hashem in it, to be totally self-sufficient. Now, this idea of a totally self-sufficient city is the notion of an Ir Chaima, of a walled city. A walled city. The pasuk is in Eicha about Yerushalayim, that Yerushalayim was such a city once upon a time. Getting to let's see, make sure that we didn't skip it. There we go. Eicha, first pasuk in Eicha. So Eicha yashva badad ha'ir rabasi am hayisaka almana. What does it mean, rabasi am? So I think Rashi already quotes here, rabasi am. So rabasi am, you said rabas am, multitude of people. Hayisa ima rav, that there was a multitude of people. So that's simply what irabasi am means. But irabasi am, it might be the Medrash Rabbah, the Eicha Rabbah. Okay, Rabasi am was Ir Shekulaba, a city that had everything. What does it mean, a city that had everything? It's a city like Yericho, En Yotze ve'en ba. What does En Yotze ve'en ba mean? Nothing goes in, nothing goes out. What happens to a city that nothing goes in and nothing goes out? So one of two things. Either the city survives because it has everything it needs, or it starves, or it dies. The Gemara in Gittin describes that Yerushalayim could have lasted for another 21 years during the times of the Bais Sheni. Right? That's not meaning Eicha is talking about Bais Rishon, but during Bais Sheni, there was enough food to last the city to be able to be besieged for 21 years. That's a irabasi am, meaning it can sustain multitudes of people, just the city by itself. There is enough here for everybody to have enough to eat and survive for another 2 decades. That's a very significant city. That's a city that is self-sufficient, that doesn't need anybody, that doesn't need anything. It has within it enough. Which means, like Migdal Bavel and like Yerushalayim, Yericho is a city that when they shut the gates, they don't have to care what goes on outside, because it can exist in a bubble. The whole world is Yericho. That's it. Self-sufficient, totally self-sufficient. Nobody needs anybody. Which means, fascinatingly, that as opposed to an open plan suburb with fields and with agriculture, which is vulnerable by definition, it is always vulnerable. You have to have people that are watching, that are guarding, that are taking care of things, that are making sure that there's no wolves coming to eat your. You have to watch these things. You have to have people that are taking care of all of this. That vulnerability disappears in a walled city. You're no longer vulnerable. You feel a sense of, I am capable. As long as I got my people, that's all that I need. Totally self-sufficient. We get to be in a walled city. Totally self-sufficient, nobody needs anything else. And what develops within that is the possibility of a culture that exists exclusively within that bubble. Because there's no need for communicating with anything on the outside. There is no requirement of trade. There is no requirement of import or export. There is no need to beg, borrow, or steal from anybody else. And nobody, and if you don't want to, nobody can come and get to you. So you can create an entire society within the walled city. The whole world can exist within that walled city. Everything that you have, everything that you want, everything that might ever be, could be there. That's it. That's the whole thing, beginning to end. Which means a couple of different and important halachas. The first is to note that it is possible for a walled city to develop a culture that is totally antithetical to the rest of the world around them. That is not true to everything outside of them. Which means that it's possible, even in Eretz Yisrael, to create such a city, which Chazal tell us, and we learned this last time, that all of the 7 nations of Eretz Yisrael were there. What does that mean? Is that was representative of the entirety of the culture of the Ovda Avodah Zarah in Eretz Yisrael. They could create an independent culture of Avodah Zarah in Eretz Yisrael, place where Einei Hashem, the eyes of Hashem are looking at it. Meireshis Hashana, from the beginning of the year, Achri Shana, until the end of the year, Hashem is always staring at Eretz Yisrael. You can create a place even within Eretz Yisrael that is not quite connected to the land, that is within your own bubble. It's a bubble. Which is also why it doesn't have the same tfisa, the same holding onto of other areas of Eretz Yisrael. Even if it's the capital city of Zvulun, yeah, but it's also not. It's also independent. It's also its own bubble. Which means that Zvulun's hold on it is not so ironclad. It's not so ironclad. It's much more representative of the individual that is holding on to that piece of land. Are you part of that world? If you are part of that world, so then within a year, with all the mazalos of the year transpiring, you'll get back there. And if not, then you won't. Then it doesn't belong to you. It's not yours. It's yours if you make it yours. Otherwise, it belongs to Klal Yisrael. Everybody can have it, so long as they pay for it. Within 12 months, you could say, well, my luck was down a little. I wasn't shaykh to this piece of property a little. But I got back there. Within 12 months, I got back there. If you didn't get back there with 12 months, then it's not yours. You and that piece of property don't connect. As opposed to if you are from Shevet Zvulun and you have a field of Shevet Zvulun, that is yours. That gets down to the root of who you are and what this land is. That you have this impenetrable connection there. So a walled city becomes a place that an entire philosophy can exist within. And the philosophy that exists within the city of Yericho is antithetical to Klal Yisrael, is against the will of the Jewish people, is against HaKadosh Baruch Hu's presence in Eretz Yisrael. How much so? So says the pasuk, "V'Yericho sogeres u'misugeres." It is closed and it is shut off. Now, I don't know if we're going to have time to understand the depth of this in full, but there is a fascinating Targum Yonasan, and Rashi quotes this as well. Rashi notes this Targum Yonasan Nuzil, "V'Yericho sogeres u'misugeres." Says the Targum, Yericho achida havas bedashin de parzela. It was sealed off with dashin de parzela, with gates of iron. Mitakfa be'arin de nachash, and was strengthened. That's sogeres means it was sogeres is it was closed with iron gates. Mitakfa, and this was strengthened be'avrin de nachash or de nashcha, depending on the version. And was strengthened with rods of nashcha. What's nashcha? Nechoshes, right? Nechoshes. But nachash is an interesting word, right? Nachash also means snakes, right? It was sealed off. It was sealed off. Sogeres with steel, sugeres with nachash with copper, and or with snakes, right? The relationship between nachash and nechoshes is a profound connection. Moshe Rabbeinu, of course, being the originator of a nechoshes, copper snake. We'll get there. So min chadam b'nei Yisrael, from the face of the Jewish people, that nobody could enter in order to do battle. And nobody could go out to extend a hand in peace. Meaning nobody could attack it, and from the outside in, and nobody from inside could go make peace with anybody on the outside. So this is a bubble. No war, no peace, no nothing. It exists as an island unto itself. On this, Chazal explain that Yericho is the lock of Eretz Yisrael. It's the lock. It's the man'ul, the seal that contains within it the entirety of the culture of the 7 nations of Canaan. They are all contained within it. Break that lock, and you open up Eretz Yisrael. If you can't break that lock, well, then there is a hold on the entire of Eretz Yisrael from this one city. Now, we noted, I think 2 or 3 shiurim ago, that Yericho, Chazal tell us, anybody that inherits Yericho also inherits Yerushalayim. And the area of Yericho was tak al tak amma. It was 500 by 500 ammas, which is exactly the same size as Har Habayis. There is this relationship between Yericho and in Eretz Yisrael and Yerushalayim in Eretz Yisrael, where that which happened in the Beis Hamikdash, Chazal tell us, was heard and smelt and felt in Yericho. The relation between Yerushalayim and Yericho is incredibly well connected. Why? Because what Yerushalayim represents, the ultimate of a city that will be the container of the right, correct philosophy of how to live in Eretz Yisrael, has its opposite in Yericho. The opposite of that walled city is this walled city. And these two stand on opposing ends of the spectrum. There is the city that is supposed to be, and the city that is not supposed to be, which means the perspective of Eretz Yisrael, and therefore of the world, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants, which is the place where Hashem would like Klal Yisrael to eventually build a Beis Hamikdash, to connect with Rebbeinu Shalom, to be that place of humanity coalescing one nation under God. And then there is the alternative. Alternative, I'm sure you've heard this terminology. It shows up in all of the Sefarim, in Chassidus, in Kabbalah, in Musar. It's the language of the Zohar. Is what the Zohar refers to as Sitra Achra. What is Sitra Achra? So Sitra Achra is like, gives people heebie-jeebies, right? Sitra Achra, the force of evil. It literally means the alternative. Sitra, side, Achra, other. The other side. The alternative. There is a world that is the world of Yerushalayim, and then there is the alternative, which is the replacement of God by saying we can create a whole world that is not connected to the Rebbeinu Shalom. A whole world that has nothing to do with Hashem. And now you got to conquer this. Now you got to break in. You have to somehow or another make your way into this city. So Hashem says to Yehoshua, "Vayomer Hashem el Yehoshua, Re'eh nasati biyadcha es Yericho ve'es Malka. I'm giving to you the city of Yericho and its king, Giborei Achayil, and all of the strong men. You're going to surround the city 6 times for 6 days, 7 times on the 7th day. Then you're going to blow the shofar, and then you are going to you're going to sound the Yovel, which is fascinating within this context. The Keren HaYovel, the sound of the Yovel. What does the Yovel do? It returns the land to its original owners. Now, this is a walled city. So in order to claim it, you have to not make it a walled city. You have to break down the fact that people can hold onto this themselves. You have to break down this human hold over this where you can live in your own bubble. You can't live in your own bubble here. This now belongs to Klal Yisrael. So the Yovel breaks this down, Mimshoch HaYovel, that time period, which we are experiencing now in surrounding Yericho. We are going to surround it, Mimshoch HaYovel, and then we are going to draw from that world of Yovel, where everything returns to the place and the status of what it needs to be. That's what we are drawing from. And then everybody will respond, Yariu Kol Ha'am Trua Gadala, that everybody is going to sound an enormous Trua, and we explained last time, Trua means shattering, breaking. Like the Pasuk in Tehillim, Tira'im B'Shevet Barzel, going to break them with an iron rod. And then everybody is going to enter into the city. Now, and so they do. They surround the city 7 times. They blow the sound of the Tekiah, which is the Bimshoch HaYovel, and then they send the Trua, the walls come down, they take the city. What Klal Yisrael does here, Chevra, is they created a wall around the walled city. That's what the surrounding is doing. Now, this is a din, by the way, in Hilchos Erevin as well. The halacha is that if you have an Erev that falls down on Shabbos, so now you have a big problem, because if the wire falls down on Shabbos, so now people are going to walk around, they're going to carry, right? They're going to carry. You can't have that. You can't inform everybody that the Erev fell down. So what do you do? What do you do? So the halacha is that to put the rope back on, you can't. That's an issur d'oraisa. That's baina. Now you've built a mechitza on Shabbos, right? You've built it. You can't build that on Shabbos. So, but you can't not. So you can ask a nachri, you can ask a non-Jew to put it back for you. That would mira lenachri, which is an issur d'Rabbanan. Rabbinic transgression, that's okay. But matzah, for the sake of mitzvah, or a tzarech rabim, or for the sake of a whole community that needs the Erev to be up, because if the Erev is down, you're going to be in trouble. So you have to go find a Jew to go and ask, please, can you put that Erev wire back up? What do you do in the meantime? So the din is that you take a group of people, get a bunch of kids, tell them, you hold that pole, and then you 5 hold hands in the middle. You make a human chain. Now you've closed your Erev again. Now, you can't have them standing there the whole of Shabbos. I mean, somebody's got to, they got to go play. They have to come back to Shul for Shalosh Seudos. So in the meantime, you can go get an Eni Yehudi and tell them, go put the thing back up. But you can make a mechitza, you can make a wall out of people. Klal Yisrael creates a wall. We claimed Yericho for ourselves by making it our walled city. We built a wall around the wall. We said it really belongs to us. That's what it belongs to. We drew from the world of Yovel that says that land goes back to who it belongs to. In the Yovel, it belongs to Avram Avinu. Because Baruch Hu said, I'm going to give your children this land. This is ours. So, but it's a walled city. It exists within its own bubble. No, it doesn't. Baruch Hu says, I will demonstrate how you bring down the wall. And once that wall comes down, now there is no longer an achiza, there's no longer a hold of the 7 nations of Canaan. You'll remember that there was this fear that the Canaanim had, this terrible, heartbreaking fear. Everybody's trembling that the Jewish people are coming. Rachav says, nobody can stand up any longer. They're all falling over themselves. They don't know what to do. They're petrified. And we asked the question, how come then they didn't go out to fight? Well, how come they didn't surrender? So the answer is that they believe themselves to be secure within their walls. Right? I'm secure. because I have my whole world here. That's all that I need. And Klal Yisrael is surrounding the city, and they're saying, well, that's no big deal. We have our own wall that's going to protect us. Which is why, lich'ora, there's no battle here. They weren't preparing for war at all. They weren't preparing for war. Now, it's interesting to point this out. I think I have this over here on our Tanakh website, Marim McComas. I think that we linked this in here. Here's the Marim McComas. For Perek Vav here. So the Vilna Gaon has a tremendous chiddush in its parsha, because Chazal tell us that the length of the wall and the height of the wall, meaning the height and breadth of the wall, was equivalent, meaning it was as high as it was thick, which is why it makes sense to say that Rachav lived in the wall. It was a very, very thick wall. How did the wall come crumbling down? How did it collapse? Meaning it was all one contiguous wall. So where did it fall? Where did it fall? So the Gra points out that it fell, if this is the wall, this over here is the wall. So Kodim and Nefila Kazeh, big wall, this is a cross section of the wall. Va'achar Nefila Hayesa Kazeh. And afterwards, it's like this. Here, on this side, this is Yericho, and here is Bnei Yisrael. It fell like this, meaning it fell towards Bnei Yisrael, which means that the people in Yericho didn't notice that their wall had just fallen down. Klal climbed up the stairs to Yericho and attacked from on top of the wall, meaning it didn't disappear. It built a ramp for Klal Yisrael just to march up and take the city. The people in Yericho, ostensibly, meaning whichever armaments or whatever guards they had patrolling within the wall, inside of the wall, they were crushed as the wall crumbled. But the inner layer of the wall stayed exactly where it was. It says, "Hanafila ha'isa letzad ha'ir v'lo letzad sheYisrael sham, she'savua mibachutz, v'nishar adayin gova lifneihem, achar afilu b'makom b'makom ha'is aleph, lekach utzrach livala, achar kach," and then the inside of the wall was swallowed up. That's what the Gemara explains. Now, one last point to point out here, and this comes from the Ramesh David Valley, talking about the Yericho Sugeres and Mesugeres, or the Targum Yonasan points out that this was umitakva ba'avrin the Nachash. So Ramesh David Valley quotes from the pasuk in Yirmiyahu. Hashem says to Bnei Yisrael, "Ani lefanecha eleich," I will go in front of you. Hadurim isher daltos nechusha ashaber. I will break the doors of nechusha, of copper. Hashem's going to fight for us. He's going to shatter the doors of copper. Says Moshe David Valley, that's the Talmud of the Ramchal. It says, "Asaidhu," the secret is, "Lefi shemilvad oisam hakochos shel kedusha hamaginim al malchios beis shel tasan kadal." Every kingdom that exists in the world has forces that Hashem wants these kingdoms to exist. So Hashem has a Sar Shel Esav and a Sar Shel Sar Shel Pras and Sar Shel Madai. There's a Sar, like we've discussed many times. That's Elohei Haaretz, the forces that Hashem puts in place. He says, "Yesh gam ken kochas acherim mitzad haklipa misitra dehahu nachash hakadmoni shnikroim daltos nechusha." inherent within each of these nations are also forces of negativity, meaning nations that exist that are not part of Malchus Israel, or not part of what Hashem wants ideally in the world, are mixed. There is that which Hashem wants this nation to represent in the world, and then there's also the negativity that is inherent within them that sometimes comes to fruition in very terrible ways. You see nations that do certainly some very wonderful things and some very terrible things. The United States of America, we love living in the U.S. The U.S. is certainly has tremendous kochas from the world of Kedusha, and also has some kochas that are not exactly from the world of Kedusha. Right? Everybody can insert whatever politics they want into that, right? But it's very clear that not everything that this country does is in line with Ratzon Hashem. That's for sure the case. So if that's true, so there are kochas that are mixed in every nation. That's called daltos nechusha. Those are the protections of the nachash. Mamish. They are coming from the world of the nachash hakarman, from that entity that tempts humanity into doing the wrong thing. These are the forces that enabled Yericho to stand. It was Sogeres Umisugeres, means that was tied up with these bonds of copper, or with the powers of the snake. When they were standing besieged with the Jewish people. As the pasuk says, it was closed off from the Jewish people. And this is what the pasuk means. Those are the forces of the alternative. It is possible for a country, for a nation, to fortify itself, to strengthen itself based on very, very wrong and evil philosophies. To become fortified with that, to believe in it strongly, to even make this a mainstay of their government and process and procedure and politics and international relations, to make that, Lamashal, North Korea today probably has some very good things going on there. Probably has some, right? Sounds blasphemous to say. It's probably some very good things that are happening. I mean, if there wasn't, then the country would have imploded already. Right? It's impossible for something to exist that is totally evil. That we've learned that grow before, right? It's the limit that tends to infinity. Once something becomes totally evil, it disintegrates. It can't exist any longer. So if it exists, there's probably some good stuff going on there. But there's also tremendous evil, and it comes out in the way that it protects itself. You have an entire nation that is propped up with daltos nechoshes, with doors, with walls, with fortifications of nechusha, of the world of the Sitra Achra, of thinking about things not in the way of Ratzon Hashem. And that's what Yericho was an entirely independent philosophy that was totally self-sufficient, economically, religiously, politically self-sufficient. That was the hold on Eretz Yisrael. And that needs to be untied. That needs to be released. That wall needs to come down so that the Jewish people would be able then to be able to take in B'mshoch HaYovel, to be able to reach into that world of Yovel that says everything needs to go back to the way that the Ribbon Shalom wants it to be. So these walls need to disintegrate. Be'ez Hashem Yisbarach, we will continue next week. Have a wonderful evening.